Welcome to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. My name is Dave Deacon. It is episode 104, so thank you for making your way back. While I have you here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button on your streaming service so you will be the first to know when a new Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast drops. We are coming to you from what is kind of becoming our usual stomping ground now, Dr. Jason Warren's research lab on the agronomy farm at Oklahoma State University. In this episode of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast, the scientists, Josh, Jason, and Brian, take a look at liquid application methods. They also weigh in on if this is a good year to fallow the ground. But first, the scientists look at planting dates and really if there's any reason to follow them. If you would like to ask the group a question, then jump over to reddirtagronomy.com and leave your question there, or send us an email directly, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com, and we will discuss your question on the podcast. So, without further ado, let's just dive in feet first with a discussion about what is happening right now in the crops world across the Southern Great Plains, and you are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. So we got a little bit of rain. The world is great, and everything is growing across the Southern Great Plains. Things are coming out of dormancy. Things will be going into the ground. Who wants to take the ball with this one and run with it? Jason, you looked at me. I'm sorry. Everybody, it's just like class. Everybody is diverting their eyes, and we're actually making eye contact. So
yeah. Well, the rain was good. The guys out in the Panhandle didn't get much.
Right.
The guys down southwest didn't get much.
You need to take that?
I'm speaking of the Panhandle. No,
he called me too.
But yeah, we're getting in better shape, I guess, as far as moisture's concerned. Every little bit's going to help.
Yeah.
Every rain from here on out on the wheat's going to be a big rain.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, and we're going into April, and that's usually where a lot of the rain starts coming in.
Well, I hope.
Hopefully.
Yeah, April showers bring May flowers.
I think that's how it goes.
That's what we used to always say when I was a kid. But yeah, and it's critical for the wheat because you're starting to see it joint and start to stand up and get to growing, and that's when it uses all its water. It really doesn't use a whole lot of water all winter long, and then now it's going to start pumping it out of the ground pretty quick. Right.
Okay. So, Josh, where are we at with thinking about summer crops?
That's the funny thing is we're about the time of year where we start getting a lot of calls on when we going to start planting and stuff like that, and everybody kind of looks at how warm we've been, and I'll use air quotes here, so, that way you can see my air quotes on the podcast. and we've had some nice warm days, but man, we have not been warm.
Yeah.
And looking at soil temperatures today, the 3-day soil temperature is still in the high 40s for a bulk majority of the state. And, we have these systems in Oklahoma, these early planted beans that growers go in 1st of April, late March, and go in with group 3s, trying to beat the heat and dry down during the hottest time of the year. And some years that's one of our best soybean systems out on the western side of the state. And I don't know if that's just going to be an option this year. Mm-hmm. We have these, we're cooler. At least our soil temperatures seem cooler than normal, and by about this point in time, we're typically planting southwest Oklahoma, and it's still in the right at 50, if at all. And looking at the 10-day forecast, they're calling for us to be cooler than normal. So while these rains are, I know there's a lot of folks, especially that have these acres that either didn't get planted to wheat because we were dry, and we had that very narrow range, or a lot of folks that maybe have caught these last couple of rains that are, either disastered out wheat or will be disastering out wheat, chomping at the bit, plant summer crops. But I know the calendar says it's the right time. I just don't know if it's the right time right now to be planting summer crops.
Well, and you've done
well, and I'll, with the exception of corn.
Right.
I think it's about time we start getting planters moving on corn. But we're just at that point. I don't think we've been at that point. I think we're just at that point.
You've done a lot of research into planting dates of different crops. Do you see any benefits to the planting dates?
They do, but it's a flaw within our research system.
Right.
April 13th this year is not April 13th last year.
Right.
And I think looking at the conditions associated, and I talk to my graduate students all the time, and you have to look at the restraints of your project. And it's not that the fact that mid-April did it, it's that mid-April, when we had warm temperatures and good soil moisture, was successful. Just like I just said, we have a soybean system that we can plant in late March, and it'd be very successful. Actually, the surprising thing, Dave, the critical soil temperature for planting soybean. You know when soybean will come out of the ground? 50 degrees. It's the same as corn.
Okay.
Do we plant it at that? Rarely. Rarely ever. No.
Let's get her done. Just do it.
And I like to see more on 60s because we have seen more early season damping off. We have seen more issues to where we get cotyledons out of the ground and those soybeans just kind of sit there, and we get these heavy rains and they splash soil up on top of the ground or up on top of the leaves, and we don't have the temperatures to dry them off, and those soybeans just end up failing to disease. Yeah. So,
and if it freezes, it's done.
Yeah, that's another good point. Is while
corn,
Easter, we say the Easter freeze, and that's just around the corner. It's an early Easter this year, but still, I mean, we're still at a tempting Mother Nature with saying it ain't going to freeze again this year, because even though it's mid-80s.
Walk out the difference. Why can't soybean take a freeze and corn can? Just to kind of.
Well, I mean, the overall long and the short of it is most of our crops that are broadleaves, our dicots, they have that growing point above the soil surface. And so when that growing point is above the soil surface, that soil no longer can kind of insulate that growing point. And so air temperature equals the death or not. Whenever you have something like corn, sorghum, wheat, something like that, when the growing point is below ground for at least a month of the season, then that soil temperature, especially if you have good soil moisture, insulates that growth point. So soil temperature more than plays a role in killing. And we can get air temperature get down into the whirl, especially if we have a crop up. But the other big thing is oftentimes on corn, we expend so little energy getting that first true leaf up that even if you kill off all that top matter, we have typically enough energy in that large seeded corn crop to get more leaves to come out. As long as that cold temperature didn't sink down to that growth point and actually kill that growth point, we'll get something back there.
Well, and one point to that is water freezes at 32, but that's measured at usually 3 feet high. The air temperature is going to be different down at the ground on that too.
For sure. And, back when we were looking at cold tolerance and, like, freeze damage on canola, we studied some of that. I had a student that kind of looked into it and was using thermal cameras to look at soil temperature. And it's, if you have a calm night and it's cool,
right,
you can have freezing temperatures at the ground.
Yeah.
And then whether you have residue or, cultivated soil radiating heat back off the ground, that changes things. And so it's not just 32 degrees at 3 feet.
Yeah.
It's how cold is the ground, how cold is the air settling onto the ground
right
going to get
at the growing point.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why we often see, especially if you look back on the wheat this last year, we have some portions of the field that die and some portions that don't, is because just the way air settles,
right,
just in that mixed topography. So it can be a coarse thing. Me and Jason, we like to argue sometimes. He's got a little place in north central Oklahoma, and last year he went in and I told him, hey, you probably don't need to be planting sorghum this early. I think wasn't it the first week in April?
Yeah, it was the 9th of April.
And I told him,
I planted corn one weekend, and then I went out and planted milo the next weekend.
I told him, you don't need to be planting this. He goes, it's got to rain this weekend, so I'm going to plant it. And I tell you, I mean, it worked. And he had a nice crop because of it. And, it's just an interesting thing is, it's some of us are a little more conservative and some of us aren't. I often tell growers, I get good general consensus on good time to plant and not. But it's your system. You have to make that decision. I can give you a couple options, but overall, you have to live with the decisions you make. I can help you, but in the end, it's your decision. And most of the time, the growers know those risks and rewards, and sometimes the risk is, like Jason last year, sometimes that risk was just enough to make.
Right.
And, it's getting to be that time with the conditions that we have, and looking at the forecast, the rain looks a lot friendlier than it did a month ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could literally go 2 weeks from now and not get another rain until June. And the decisions that our growers are having to make right now are some of the more challenging ones, because once you get a crop in, you can make those decisions. But getting that crop in is probably one of the riskiest but rewarding decisions you can make. It's a big challenge, and there's no right or wrong answer. And overall, I think that's it's admirable that they're having to make it. And I mean, that's why we've stopped doing less and less. Have we done like planting date trials?
Right.
A lot of our trials look at before optimum or after optimum. So like right now, if I were to go in and plant a soybean trial and I would plant it tomorrow, this would be considered before optimum, because if a grower came to me and said, should I plant, I would say no, it's too early. So this is that before optimum.
Does that optimum date change throughout the years? Does it change throughout the different varieties of a plant? I mean, does you planted sorghum on this date for 40 years, but really, you found research that maybe it should be pushed back due to whatever in the world, but it needs to be pushed back 3 days or whatever in the perfect optimum world.
Yeah, and I think the chance of like that first, it's just that first person that rolls the dice and tries it. Jason, talk about how sorghum is always planted the first week of June until these last couple of years. Then we've seen a good chunk of people starting that last week in May, and we've even seen some people the second or third week in May in the Panhandle plant sorghum, and some of them have been successful.
Yeah, well, and that's in the Panhandle, we always plant the first June, and we used to have an agronomist that'd say avoid May like the plague for planting anything in the Panhandle, and we used to plant corn in April and then plant milo in May. And what growers are telling us is they're having better success getting the milo out of the ground the last few years, because they've been going back into a drought for the last 2 years. I'd say they've had some success. Last year was a phenomenal irrigated corn year, but for dryland stuff, further west you go, you got smoke. But if you get it in a little early into the ground where it's moist instead of hitting the heat in June, then they do pretty good. And then the thing about corn, we've so they're moving stuff into May, partly because of time management and partly because of, better planting conditions. And then like with the corn, we've moved that from April 15th to about the first week of May, and it's all about water. To get, like right now, they're drying a popcorn fart in the Panhandle. If you wanted to plant corn 2 weeks from now, you need to pre-irrigate, and then you're going to keep irrigating until it starts raining. And if we push it into May a little bit, we might start catching some rains, because that's a rainy season. And even downstate, 20 years ago, everybody planted milo in June, and now that's not optimum for full season milo, because you can push it back into early May, middle April, as soon as you're frost free, and you can get it out of the ground and catch all those spring rains. It depends on, those optimums depend on where your water is. Of course, I'm the soil water guy, but like when your rainfall is going to hit. Out in the Panhandle, it's the middle of summer. Downstate, it's through the spring, and then you're going to run out of gas in August on average. But sometimes
how much of that June and the old stuff that's when they were available? They just kind of roll through one thing, and then hit June, or was it actually?
I don't know. I think that to some extent there's like when I talk to my family, like my dad and my father-in-law, and like even like forage sorghum, they want to wait till June to plant because they think that's when the soil temperature's right. And I mean, I don't know if the genetics changed or what, but we can get it out of the ground in April.
And you see, it's all about risk and what your risk is. And like you said, water is one of the big ones, especially in Oklahoma. We talk about it all the time. But going back to what you said, Brian, is, you talk to the folks that have been growing out in the Panhandle sorghum for a number of years, and they always say that they have a rainy season and a non-rainy season, and that's probably you have to take that to a grain of salt what you consider a rainy season out there, but it's very true. We typically would 4, 5, 6 years ago get those August, September rains, which that's if you waited until mid-June to plant your sorghum out there, that's when you'd start heading, and that's when you'd fill grain, and that's kind of when you wanted that moisture to come around. And so it was there. Well, the last 3 years, we haven't had that. No. We've been very dry in August and September and very hot as well. I mean, those 100-degree temperatures, I remember growing up in Oklahoma, it was end of June through all of July, we were 100 degrees. Well, as I remember, we're getting a lot more 100 degrees in August and even into September than I remember growing up. Now, that could have just been a falsehood of me not knowing any better, but I have a feeling we're getting hotter and drier a little bit later when that typical rainy season out there occurs. And so, but you also have other things. You have aphids to worry about. You have weed dynamics to worry about. And you have
aphids is a big deal of it. Yeah. Of course, we've kind of knocked that back quite a bit, but that beat up a lot of late planted milo.
Well, but you're starting to see a lot more of that come back.
Yeah. And that's why I say they've done a good job with the genetics and holding it back in Texas, right?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is I think a lot of it depends on the wheat. Mm-hmm. Last year we were talking about, well, how quickly can I terminate my wheat and get a summer crop in? Well, this year, all those terminated fields, if they look good, ain't getting terminated.
Right.
And so it's, we're going to see a shift. I think we'll see a shift to, if we get rain in June, we'll see some good amount of double crop acres that we didn't have. If we don't get a rain, we'll just go into wheat next year, because if this price holds, it's a lot better to roll the dice on wheat than it is on soybean and June planted soybean or sorghum when it's not raining. So
go ahead.
I was just going to say, Josh, can you give a little bit, because you did some really fun germination temperature stuff on sorghum. Can you kind of give a little brief on that?
We run it every about 2 or 3 years. We look at cold soil germination, and this is to answer that question, like how early in April. Go back to your decision. Or your discussion, Dave. It's not necessarily in April. It's just these are the temperatures we get in April typically on how early. We typically like to see sorghum go to 60-degree soil temperature and be fine. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that want to plant at 58. And kind of like what you were saying, 58 just doesn't seem like that's just a couple days, but a couple days, a week can be the difference on a failure and a disaster, or a failure and a success, I should say. And so once we found, I think about 90% of our varieties we tested were good at 58. Mm-hmm. So then we went down to 55, and then when we did that, it was, can we get it at 50, and it just kind of that ratcheted down. And I actually showed a picture that University of Nebraska showed today, and it was on soybeans. It wasn't on sorghum, but it's the same thing as a lot of our summer crops. The earlier we plant, the more warming trends we need. And whenever soybeans were planted at 60 degrees for 72 hours, they had about 3/4 of the soybeans at least starting to grow root. Whenever they put it at 40 degrees, they had about 1/4 showing a root. 3/4 of it hadn't grown at all. And so that's one thing we don't want. It's great to push the envelope and see what varieties we can go, but eventually at some point in time, it's just plain too cold. And and it's not necessarily for me to decide. That's why we run it all the way down to 50.
Right.
But the risk that you carry sometimes is it worth it? And
one thing I've always thought of was the germination. I mean, that's why you plant on this date, so that way it has the temperature to grow and become that plant. But you also have aphids to think about, insect pressure, you have moisture, you have all of that after that. So, I mean, there is that variability that goes into adjusting a planting date or a perfect condition for the plant to be.
Well, and the good thing is on something like corn and sorghum, you can use degree days on average to say, when am I going to hit these critical stages that moisture is going to be an issue?
Yeah.
And then say to yourself, okay, if I plant now, typical degree days means that July 14th I'm going to hit tassel. Is that okay? You know,
right.
I need to make that decision and then kind of move it around based on that. That way you can kind of take advantage. But once again, that's estimating.
Yeah.
You know, the only thing we can work on is looking at Mesnet, saying this is the 3-day soil temperature, going out and getting a soil probe and putting it into the ground and saying it's cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the only good data we have is what's happening right now, because in the future, we don't know.
Well, and that's the brutal thing, man. Like, I've been here for 15 years. I grew up out in western Oklahoma, and I still don't know when the hell the weather's going to do. I mean, and years ago, there was some folks talking about, you know, climate change and how the weather shifted, and we're going from a from a bimodal rainfall pattern, meaning that it's going to rain in the spring and rain in the fall, and then we're going to go into monomodal where it's just going to rain in the summer. And then, like, the next year, it rained in the spring and rained in the fall and didn't rain all summer. I mean, every year is so much different. And that's where I think I agree 100%, is you have to play the odds, and the best thing you can do is get it out of the ground and then hope that it falls the way it falls.
Well,
and you've got a good, strong, healthy plant out there during stressful periods.
Well, and a couple of things. One, these years, like this year, is one of the worst years because, you know, we're transitioning between, you know, our La Nina, El Nino. This is a transition year, which, you know, Gary McManus came and talked at the Panhandle and said, basically, I don't know what's going to happen. You know, it's not supposed to do what it's doing right now.
He drove all that way just to
go,
I don't know what's going on.
He did it on Zoom. He said that, you know, he did it on Zoom. He had other things that the growers thought that they didn't want to revolt, and, you know, he didn't want to be there for the revolt.
I don't blame him.
But you have that, and then, you know, an issue we've had the last couple of years is getting too much growth on our summer crop.
Yeah.
You know, we had it last year. We had a lot of soybeans that looked excellent in August because they look like we're in the middle of Iowa. And in a good year, that's great. Mm-hmm. That's the way we get 80 bushel beans. But in a year like last year when the moisture shut off, some of the more
15 bushel beans.
some of the more moderate soybeans and sorghum and corn ended up yielding a lot better because we didn't have to hold that big, gigantic biomass. And that's another big thing is the earlier we plant, we take advantage of these really cooler temperatures, this good moisture, and we can get a tremendous plant on us.
Yeah.
In Oklahoma, sometimes we don't want a tremendous plant.
Yeah.
That's true.
You know, it's
more
one of those
efficient
things we have to kind of, you know, ratchet it down one or two. I know it looks like Ames sometimes around here, but we're not Ames. And so it's another thing that you have to think about is that if I plant early and the temperatures continue on the 2 and 3 week forecast the way that they're forecasted, man, it could be really good, but am I going to be able to support all that biomass at the later end? And once again, I don't want to not have a good looking crop going into summer, but sometimes, like the last couple of years, man, it's came back and bit us in some instances.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen the same thing with beans when I was doing a lot of early season fertility work, a lot of starter work. That, and this was before. I mean, this would have been like 8-9 years ago, where get the beans in, lay lots of fertility down on the starter, and we come into, you know, and it's rode over. Everything looks huge. The old check plots are small and everything, and then we bring the combine in, and the checks are cutting 60, and everything that's big and viney and all that extra fertility is cutting 25 and 30.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was that we just had that rank growth that never supported in a dry land system or rain-fed system.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brutal.
But then if it rained, it'd been awesome.
What'd you do with that data?
It's sitting on a shelf, man.
Fertilizer's inversely proportional to yield.
Published in a thesis. Actually, did we get that starter out in a paper?
Yeah.
It's peer review published too, boy.
Wow, you went all the way with that.
Jeez.
But it is that back and forth, and it's, I mean, there's no easy way to it, and it's, you know, we sat here and we've talked for a long time about when we've done it and when we haven't. And we're probably sitting at the same situation we were before we even started talking. I don't know.
Right.
But I hold to the thing of that the only data we can go off of and be consistent with is what Mesonet says it's been and what you know it is right now, and that's what you have to go off of.
I don't know. It goes back to like our very first podcast where we talked about the value of diversification.
Yeah.
Is switching up. I mean, this might be your risk with a few acres early. See what happens.
Yeah. Plant often.
Plant often.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you select those crops that can come out of the ground, start planting them, and then plant a little this, plant a little that. Just don't do stupid stuff. Like Edwards,
Can you define that?
Jeff Edwards, he told me years ago. I told him, I was like, yeah, we should, do some planting date stuff on wheat. And he looked at me, and he'd been here, 5-10 years before that. And he's like, I'm not doing that. And I said, why not? It would be good. He's like, I could do that for 10 years in 10 locations all over the state, and I still wouldn't be able to tell you the exact, planting date. And it just, you can tell them a good window, but not an exact date. And because it comes down to like what's going to happen next and what has happened already.
When it goes back to what we do is looking at suboptimum planning and optimum planning, because it's eventually over a couple years they'll be able to say, hey, there's a risk associated, and that risk is typically 5 bushel.
Yeah.
But in a good year, it works great, man.
I know. Well, and the thing is too, like up where my wife's farm is, I had growers telling me, it's like, yeah, it's just so hard to plant, because it get wet and it stays wet. And that's a freaking fact. And if you're in an environment where it stays wet and you keep mud holes around, and especially with big equipment, small equipment, you can just go around the mud holes and be just fine. But you're running, 40 rows wide, it's advantageous to wait until it dries out. But if it rains every week, you're out of luck because the mud holes are not going to dry out. You're just going to have to roll around them. And so there's a lot of things like that you have to consider when you start looking at planting and getting things done. You may not always be able to wait until optimum.
Here's
you might be waiting until suboptimum.
Along the lines, let's play with the transition of north central. Do you make a call right now on what you plant based upon subsoil moisture, or is it whatever you've got planned? Versus if you're looking at corn, rain-fed corn, sorghum, soy, are you playing the market? Are you playing your soil type, the farm type? What are you dialing in for a specific field if you're making that call? Or would you change if you had a plan for corn? Is there something that changed your mind?
Well, for me personally, I've already changed my mind. I'm not planting corn.
Well, why?
Because I don't want to buy fertilizer.
Well, I think that's a good point this year.
And I see where I'm at is the soil moisture is a little deficit for me to make a break-even corn yield. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to wait and plant beans. And if I zero out, I'll have less money in them. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm at. But if I'm a larger farmer, most of those decisions have been made, right? And it just comes down to what fields am I going to plant, where is the highest likelihood of success. I'm going to put my effort in that, and then just give her hell on everything else.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to playing your crop rotations versus not as well. This first thing we kind of talked about when we did the first one is the value of the crop rotation, and if it doesn't work, then you got to just maintain that, and whether that is going to a forage or something like that. But I think struggling to find that next hit. I want to do corn, but the soil moisture never really got there. I didn't get enough rain, so I'm going to go to beans, and I'm going to hold those for a while. Now I'm going to go to cotton. If I miss, I'm either thinking about doing some sort of forage, or I'm just going to say I'm going to get ready for wheat, and I'm going to be really ready for wheat this next year.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the fertilizer that's going to go into the crop and making that decision, Brian. Where are we with the fertilizer world right now?
Oh boy,
hot air balloon, and they're pouring the fire to it right now.
Yeah,
it's ugly beyond terms. I mean, I think I was up in Alva on Friday, and the new reports on all the fertilizer prices up anywhere between 10 and 20%.
Right.
we'll expect another hike in 10 or 20%, I would expect, as things move forward. And so we're I know liquid's selling in different places right now. UAN is a $1.10 to $1.20 a pound of nitrogen right now. Urea is $90 to $1. Gas is $80 to $90, if not over $1 right now. And so potash is going to go up and phos is going to go up. That I can promise you, potash and phos will go up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know what the guys are doing on their own farms, but I've just started getting information in on our Testing Ag Performance Solution trial, where these guys tell me how much fertilizer they want on their corn, and the rates have been cut back. I mean, because
and I upped ours.
Yeah, on that contest it's $1,500 a ton for ammonia, and we're going to strip till that in a month. And so guys have started telling me how much they want.
Yeah,
and it's considerably less than what they were asking for last year and the year before that. And part of that is that the data from last year showed that the in rates weren't really all that proportional to profit, because marketing and all these other things, hybrid selection, and the efficiency of those hybrids and all that affect it more than how much fertilizer you put out. Now, granted, the highest yielding treatments had good fertility applied to them, a couple 100 pounds of N, but guys are foregoing that anhydrous right now, and I assume that they're going to supplement it, with fertigation or whatever. So it's kind of interesting to see that project tying in, $800 a ton.
Yep.
That pour
That's
the
one
coals
thing,
to it. $1,500 a ton.
That's 92-cent nitrogen right there for gas.
Yeah, that's pretty freaking expensive.
So, that's where everybody's talking about earlier late. But then again, on the wheat stuff, I've had a lot of guys talking about, man, that nitrogen's expensive on wheat. It is so expensive. And I look at it as like, you've got a yellow field.
Yeah.
Your wheat is yellow.
Yeah.
You don't have to put on 200 pounds or even 150 pounds. If you put on 50 or 60 pounds on yellow wheat right now, you're probably going to have a really good return on investment, meaning that conversion might be down to 1.5 pounds of N per bushel.
Yeah.
It could even be as bad as 2, but it's going to be efficient. And I don't know, if I've got $1.25 nitrogen, let's say worst case, and I get 2 pounds N per bushel, that's $2.50 I've got in per bushel. What's the bushel of wheat right now, Jay?
No, $9.80.
$9.80. Let's say I get $8. That's still 6 over.
Yeah.
There's some opportunity, especially on yellow wheat out there right now.
Yeah.
So with that said, that's this crop. If we're thinking everything stays the same, where next year at planting date, or what that's in some ways that's too far ahead to look at it. But I mean, thinking in the soil, what does the picture look like for inputs that need to go in with next year's crop?
If your air seeder or drill doesn't have the capability to do fertilizer, get that capability and order it now, because it's going to take 6 months to put it on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so what about summer crops? I mean, we talked about planting day and stuff like that. I think this is where we were going the last podcast on inputs, but
no,
yes, but everything's expensive. Chemical, herbicides expensive, fungicides expensive, insecticides expensive, or not even available. Growers looking to decrease costs. How do they do it from a fertility standpoint? Like, what do you tell folks to do when they have to decrease cost?
My big thing is, one, I've told you this, if you've never sold a sample, get a composite yesterday. Do that much. If you got a composite from the last 3 years, get a zone. If you got a zone from the last 3 years, get a grid, whatever it takes to get one more level. And you guys probably would agree, I don't talk about nitrate soil tests very often. That's not something I look at or really give much consideration to. But if gas is 90 cents a pound of N, I'm at least intrigued with what's at 6 to 12 or 6 to 18 inches with the deep sample. Yeah. And if I come up and I show 40 to 50 pounds of nitrate at depth, I'll give 20 or 30 pounds of credit.
Yeah.
That's $20 to $25 of product per acre that I'm crediting that I know. If it's empty, that also tells me that, man, I'm going to need everything I need to look at my conversion. I need to make sure that I'm in on that. Fertility-wise, man, have that composite soil sample. If you're anywhere near 6 or below 5.5 to 6, you better have a starter. I don't care, corn, cotton, soy, you need some phos in there, and you need it to figure out to be compensating for that pH issue. Same thing if your phos is 32 ppm. If it's between 27 to 35 ppm on a composite, that starter, there's going to be areas of the field that need it. Because if your composite's a 6, your field probably goes from a 5 to 7 pH. If your composite's a 32 ppm, it probably goes from a 10 to 60. And so a little bit of starter has a lot of value in those ranges. Now, if your pH is high or your phos is already high as a whole, then don't worry about it. And my one deal is, so you got the nitrate, consider deep sampling for your corn, sorghum, and cotton. Give a portion. And 2, if you have a consultant making your fertility recs, so whether it's CropQuest, whether it's, a private, ask, and they use yield. If your yield goal changes your P&K recommendations, that means they're using a replacement value. It's not just soil test, it is replacement, which means if you say you want more, they're going to replace more because you're removing more. That is absolutely fine for high-yielding crops and low fertilizer cost. I'm not saying get away from that replacement if you're high-end, but you don't have to do a one-for-one. You ask them, what replacement are you doing? Do 30%. Do 40%. You can still do the sufficiency by that. That gives you the added crop removal. It's a CYA. That makes sure if you're doing crop removal, you are never, ever going to under-fertilize a crop because the removal rates are above that of the sufficiency unless you're at a 0. Mm-hmm. And so pull that down, pull it from 100% or 75% replacement down to 50 or 30% replacement, adjust those values. Make sure you got it on where you need it, but we don't need to replace 100% removal in any of our crops, as I said.
Well, so let me ask you a question on you've shown with wheat that, the more fertilizer you put at joining or around joining or even a little bit later, the better, trying to get away from that up front. You've seen that very similar thing with sorghum that a good split is better than all up front. And Bill Ron's saying that with corn. Mm-hmm. So our folks that are going out in corn and sorghum with like you were saying, the cost is bound to go up.
Yeah.
Is it better to go with up front now and get cheaper fertilizer or get better efficiency but more expensive fertilizer in season?
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, Brian.
Are you going to get a stand on that crop? Am I going on a field that has no subsoil moisture?
It's in Elk City, Oklahoma.
No pre-plant. So I'd look at it this way. If I've got really good subsoil moisture on a deep, well-drained ground and everything looks good, bottom ground, get it on. If I'm out there up in northwest Oklahoma and I've got 3 or 4 inches of moisture in the top and I've got nothing below that, I'm not putting inputs into that crop. I'm sorry. I will maybe lose 10 cents a pound of in or pay 10 or 15 cents more per pound, but I'm not going to invest a whole lot on something that I have no water in that fuel tank until we fill up.
Yeah.
And so it, to me, it could be field by field, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I've got that field that's always a producer, I'm going to deep soil sample, just see what's there. If I can get cheap nitrogen, and nitrogen might go down.
Yeah.
It might go up. It might stay the same. I don't know. I'm not Kim Anderson.
That's
so to that side, do you buy
it's not
your
a third,
nitrogen
a third,
a third?
Yeah, a third. That's a funny joke. I'm not a huge summer crops, and unless I'm fertigating under irrigation or something like that, the timing and ability to get that fertilizer out there and catch a good rain is pretty sketchy for me.
Yeah.
And so generally, I like, I'm pretty conservative in how much I put out there, but I'm gonna most of the time put it out there pre-plant. But this year, if I were growing something like corn or milo or something like that need plenty of nitrogen, I would look at it later in the season and see what is actually going to happen, because that's if we can make 80 bushel corn, even 50, 60 bushel corn or milo or whatever, that's not bad. No. But if it zeroes out and I got $100 an acre and nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty sketchy.
Yeah,
pencil.
that's only 80 pounds of N too, by the way. So
That's what I'm saying. And so if you can forego that application to see if you're going to make something.
This is my deal too. The forego the application because, again, this is for the ground that doesn't have good soil moisture profile right now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry about going in season whether it rains in or not.
Yeah.
Because if I make the decision to go in season, that means we've received a moisture we're probably going to keep.
Yeah.
If it doesn't get rained in, the crop's dead anyways.
Yeah.
It's true.
I ain't making it.
Yeah.
And so get a stand, see what's under you. Do you get some building? And that's one of the sorghum projects we've had. We call it the Burn Baby Burn project, where we try to kill sorghum with different over-the-top fertilizer applications. So, flat fanning on, 20 gallons UAN at 100-degree weather.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds dumb.
We'll lose yield that way.
Yeah.
But we also tried streamers on 30s and 60s and drop nozzles and Schaefer T-bars. Any way you could apply liquid fertilizer and dry, because we broadcast over the top urea and we do it down row. I mean, we had 12 different methods of applying nitrogen. We waited till it was hot, midday, low humidity, to see how much impact we could have. And really, a streamer nozzle, dropped or not dropped on 60s or 30s, we just tattered the leaves and it moved on. Sorghum just could care less.
That's it. I've done that in experiments. Like I've sprayed it over the top, and it always makes you nervous. And I don't do it like for experiments that I'm real worried about. But like if somebody didn't get fertilizer out, then I've put it out. What, V6, V8 or something like that. And it burns the crap out of the leaves, but it comes back and it does better than it would have done that had not fertilized. Mm-hmm. And we're talking, that's been years ago actually since I've done that. That was probably during the drought, last go around, because I was like, it's not going to grow.
Yeah.
I'm not going to freaking fertilize it. And then it rains. Oh my gosh, it rains. We're going to have to fertilize it, and then you just burn the crap out of the leaves. But that I can't remember how long ago that's been. But I put some up here on the highway in Stillwater. Mm-hmm. Everybody drove by and thought I killed it.
Well, that's okay. His looked awful in Chickasha. Everybody saw it going down the turnpike.
You do 20-gallon flat fan
in
the middle of the hot day, and we waited till like 10 leaf. I mean, we were
What kind of yield drag did you get from that?
So the flat across at Chickasha is the best because we had no end response, so we could look at only the impact of the burn. The flat fan, the 20s, and the Schaefer on 20s. So we did Schaefer streamer bar and the flat fan on 20s. We cut ourselves. It went from about 130 bushel down to 100 bushel. We probably lost just 30 bushel. Yeah. Everything else maintained. Mm-hmm. So if I was on a 30 to 60-inch row space with SJ3s.
Some of those streamers look bad.
They did look bad,
Some of those streamers looked bad for a long time.
But they didn't do anything?
Mm-mm.
No, we did between row. So, and I was talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was. I've talked to a couple guys about this that did some of that stuff and didn't do drops. And their booms, they had a little cross row, and so SJ3, and they had them turned long ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you get that over the crop canopy or right over the whirl, and that's not good at 20 or 30
that's
gallons.
That's what I was planning on doing.
You got a flat enough ground. Just make sure it stays between the rows.
Yeah, but my rows are crooked as hell.
Get some drops. Have you guys seen those homemade wide drops? Everybody's done some of the homemade wide drops. Those are some fun rigs.
Oh, yeah.
Hydraulic hose or PVC pipe.
I've done that.
Well, coming up, we're going to take a quick break, and coming up after the break, we will rejoin Brian and Josh, answer some hard-hitting questions about the world of agronomy. Jason's going to go judge land. That's what you do.
Yeah, I got to go teach the children.
Yeah.
Teach
I guess.
Shaping the minds of America.
Yeah. We're going to go to Ohio for soil judging, so we got to get prepared.
Oh, that's cool. Are they not doing the nationals here?
Oh yeah, we got all kinds of soil and land and range judging contests going on. That's why my heart beats 100 miles an hour.
Right.
But I got to take my collegiate team to Ohio, and then the FFA and 4-H come.
Gotcha.
Here.
Because that's I mean, the one in Oklahoma City or in Oklahoma has been here for
a long time.
Yeah.
I don't even. Yeah, it's been here forever.
Ever.
I'm not going to quote the dates or like but it's like in the 60s or 70th.
That's pretty cool.
Annual.
That's cool. Well, Well, good luck with all that, and we will be back right after this.
And that actually helped out quite a bit. I've had that question about planting dates for quite a while, and I thought that was pretty helpful. Now, if you'd like to find out more information about what the doctors talked about, you can find it at reddirtagronomy.com. And if you have a question for the group, send us an email, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com, or send us a tweet. Of course, our handle is reddirtag on the Twitter sphere. Now, Dr. Josh Lofton and Dr. Brian Arnell weigh in on if this could be a good year to set out because of input prices. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast.
So, Josh, whenever people are thinking of summer crops, there are people out there that may just want to go fallow with their field. There's a difference between going fallow and just letting it set.
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
I've kind of been a big proponent of, most of our fields that have summer crops in it typically have a weed problem somewhere.
Right.
Not to the fault of any one producer, but, pigweeds and Johnson grass and crabgrass and stuff like that. And so I've always been a big proponent, if you're going to fallow out, take care of some of those problematic weeds that are difficult in a crop season. And so the question, posed is this a good year to potentially fallow out? And I don't know. Mm-hmm. Costs are so high. I don't know if I could justify spending money on an herbicide on a field that has no grain to it or no forage to it. And so, it's one of those things I always say it's a discussion that a grower and their banker and everybody has to make. And man, I just, Brian, with these costs, I don't know if you could justify
just glyphosate alone. I don't know how you could justify
even paraquat alone. I mean, just
you probably won't find paraquat,
Yeah,
so you
that's
got
true.
that going for you too. No, I think the herbicide. If nothing else, if you're looking at fallowing out, put something in the ground that you grow as a forage, swath it off, and use that as weed control.
Yeah.
And then come down and get.
Well,
get
now
it
that
early.
Jason's not here, we can talk about cover crops.
We can talk about cover crops. But no, I mean, the fallow option is just a tough one. But I would plant something you could hay off, because good chance there's going to be a need for hay this year too.
Yeah. That the more and more folks I talk about, the potential hay shortage coming at us is pretty strong, and so there's a potential to do something that's cost effective, that might not need a tremendous amount of fertilizer, that might not need that herbicide, that might be able to have something in there to where we can still potentially get a good wheat crop next year and do something. But I don't know if this would be a year that I could justify doing a real fallow, which would involve some inputs, because inputs are just too astronomical.
With that being said, what would be? I've asked you this before. Every year I ask you this, and every year you give me the scientific, watered
He's
down,
saying, answer
generic
his
answer.
dang question, Lofton.
What if I don't know it? That's why I give you
that's why you give it to me.
one.
But what are the strongest summer crops? Knowing where we are right now, with the moisture situation, with the input prices, with commodity prices being what they are / could be. What does the Josh Lofton patented crystal ball say?
Well, Dave, the scientific name of soybean is. That's a hard one.
Yeah.
A month ago or a month and a half, when we first started doing this, and we were very deficient in rain, and the snows we were getting weren't doing a whole lot, and all that, I would have said it was a good forage sorghum, grain sorghum, cotton year. Mm-hmm. And I still hold to that. I think it's a good year for all of those. One, because those are relatively low fertilizer inputs that we could probably get by with a little bit lower as compared to like a corn.
Lint price is up.
Lint price looks really good. Hay, we talked about there potentially being a hay shortage, and sorghum prices look to be strong, if not growing. But like things like soybean, with the moisture we've gotten, especially back east, I mean, it's hard to now count that out. I think that the rain we've gotten over the last 3 weeks, especially the eastern side of the state,
Right.
I mean, the western side is still in a much tougher scenario, but the eastern side of the state, especially the far eastern side of the state, I think just soybean is a good option if you can get chemical reasonably. And I think it's a really good option, but the chemical cost and availability is, I would make sure that, one, I could get glyphos, two, I could get whatever your traded product is going to be, and if not, I could get some of those conventional chemicals, because if we have a good soybean year, that also means most of the time we have a good weed year.
Right.
So, crystal ball me this. Is there a point where you'd be scared with grain sorghum? Could sugarcane aphid be a problem? Are we out of the woods with that being a major issue? Because I'm hearing word that our insecticide options are near nothing because of registration levels, because of accessibility, because of price. So is that something you fear, or you just roll with it? Just hope you don't have aphids?
The more sorghum we get across Texas, the higher likelihood we might see another spike in it, and that's definitely a Tom Royer thing. What he thinks. Ask me in a month. Okay. You know, when the Rio Grande valleys, you know, actually got a good sorghum crop up and they're starting to see things, because I think that's usually our telltale is if South Texas and northern Mexico are seeing them, then we're definitely going to see them. But, you know, if they're really just not even seeing things, I don't know. I don't think at this point in time, based on the last couple of years and the options we have of very good, strong varieties that have some degree of tolerance, I don't think that it scares me off like it would have 5 years ago. But it has to be one of those things of if you're in those situations to where you're either A, late, or B, in the panhandle to where you inherently are later, I'm looking to see what my options are, you know, kind of rolling the dice from there. But I mean, you could say the same thing on like stink bugs and soy. You know, if it's a really bad stink bug year, what is the availability of some of that chemical is, and the cost, is it going to be beneficial? And
I'll throw you another one sideways. We talk about input cost. Value proposition for narrow row beans versus wide row beans for potential seed savings, herbicide things. Should there be discussion about 30s versus 15s or 10s, or?
I mean, I'm always a big proponent of plant soybeans in the piece of equipment you have the best singulation for, because soybean are very critical at getting good populations down, especially if you're going to ratchet down your seed costs by going down to something like seeding rate of like 100 to 90 to even 85,000. If I have a really good piece of equipment that's on 15s that I know I'm going to get really good singulation on, I go with that. If the only option I have is 30s, I go with that. You know, what I don't want to do is waste a lot of my cost on seed, which is still rather expensive in soybean, just to get maybe a one last pass on glyphosate, because it's going to.
Are we going to have low pop mafia on soybean this year?
I don't know if it's going to gain the interest like the corn does, but I think a lot of growers are coming to the realization that 120 full season soybeans is probably much higher than we need to be. You know, the big thing is I've never been a big proponent on full season beans on drill rows, but I think that it just needs a little bit more room to grow. I don't think that it's wrong. I like my soybeans having a little bit more room to grow.
So we'll go fertility wise, and this is one thing I wish we had the equipment to try. I could see it potentially if we're in some of the sands or the heavier ground. I would like to see us as OSU look at the air seeder model of beans on 15s with K put in between. So every other row being a potassium band. I know we do. I've got some guys that do it on sorghum with nitrogen, and it's highly. It works out great. I've tried it a little bit. My equipment can't quite replicate it on K.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting, and I guess that was something I was going to bring up, is this the year to try to put as much as you can in furrow or off furrow, as opposed to broadcast applied, your P and K and stuff like that, because of cost. I mean, is this the year to, if you have the availability, is this the year to try that?
I would say in furrow with most things. I mean, FOS in furrow, yeah, that's fine. K, you start getting it too hot with beans.
Well, I mean, off row on that one,
like a 2x2.
Yeah, or like what you're talking about with 15s, and is this the year to try it?
I think. This I think is a year that if you have soybean, corn, or sorghum that go in on a planter, and you don't have 2x2 or want to run liquid and want to run a dryer source, you break out the old air seeder and you put it down with your air seeder ahead of time instead of broadcast. If your options are broadcast, especially in no-till, versus putting it down with the air seeder, I think your value's in doing it with an air seeder. I know there's equipment cost in there and some repair cost and all that, but I think that band opportunity has value. Yeah. And you could do it variable rate with that really easily.
Well, and that, I mean, it's a good point, kind of like what you brought up with the herbicide, is that, the closer rows we get, the better control we can get, because we lap a little bit earlier. And really that's going to come down to, like I said, availability or chemical, and is that worth going 15s if that's not the best equipment you have to do the job. But that's going to be a grower by grower. I don't think as much field by field, but that's going to be a grower by grower basis. Especially the later you get, the more I'm okay with those more narrow inch beans. I think one of the reasons why I'm so not against it, but so hesitant for it is that's one place we're very deficient on data, is drill row early season beans. 7.5 to 10-inch beans, and how you manage those, or is it any different? Do you just do the same thing like you always do? And it's one thing we're deficient in. We don't have a whole lot of good data on, so I can't make a whole lot of recommendations because we don't have a lot of good data.
Speculate, on it. Lofton. I mean, that's what this podcast is about.
In a perfect world, it would be.
There's some plus and minus. Like I said, if you had a really good air seeder you liked, and you knew you could get good singulation with it, and you were worried because I either can't get dicamba, I can't get dicamba beans, I'm worried about availability, or maybe I booked 2,4-D beans and I might not be able to get 2,4-D this year. Am I gonna? Well, I mean, it's a good shot, because that's a good strategy of using your beans to aid in that weed control, and I think that's a good viable option, and that's a venture I would take. But if I were going down to that, I would do it purposefully. Yeah, I wouldn't do it just because I wanted to try it. I would do it very purposely.
I mean, I'm with you. Double crop beans, I love 15s. There's nothing against 30s, but on the double crops, I like that 15, and on sorghum too. You usually get a smaller plant, get a little bit better row coverage, and you can cover acres well. But I'm just wondering on the full season stuff.
Well, and this last year was the first year we really started, like half of our trials were on 15s, just due to the fact that you had a lot of folks that, like you said, now ours were on 15 planters, but, like you said, we're going every other row air seeder and are starting to see some value to that. So we're trying to adjust to that. Like I said, the biggest deficiency, at least my program has, is on drill beans. I don't know a whole lot of information on it because we can only go a step at a time. I guess.
I tried to get John Deere to help me build a mini air seeder and never quite got that to pan out. Working on it, though. Got some other things. We're working on a replicate, because I'd really like to see that where we can have multiple commodities and replicate that. It may not have to be like a true air seeder style, but we have something where we can have multiple commodities choosing to go front gang, back gang, blend it in that way, and do some more of that work. But that's got to be built. So
yeah. So with that, you were talking full season and double crop soybeans. Are there benefits? I mean, there are benefits to doing a double crop soybean, but is there a benefit to have the full growing season with that? I know that's kind of a vague question, but I mean, rather, I guess it would equate to having soybeans, but pushing the actual planting date back.
Yeah. So there's a big consensus. There's a couple of growers, couple of consultants. We actually had one of those said consultants on here a couple of weeks ago that really even likes what you would consider full season, not behind wheat, to just go in mid-June. The further west you get, the more that system makes sense, because we typically don't have those very, very predictable rainfall events from late June through much of July until we get into that mid to late August. The temperatures are really high, and whenever you plant early season, then you have this system that flowering and pod filling kind of reached that stage to where it goes through during that time. And so there's some justifiable there's some positivity to that of being that be the only time you plant soybeans in western Oklahoma. I go to the one thing is that's a very hard rotation. You typically will have to go potentially out of wheat or have very, very low grown wheat in the fall, because you are going back to harvesting mid to late October.
Right.
So you're not going to be planting wheat at best until probably late October, early November. And so you'd have to either fallow out, go to another full season crop, which is fine. I mean, I'm all for that. The other thing is the predictability of rain in June.
Right.
I mean, some years we have great double crop planting, and some years, like last year, I wasn't sure we were going to get a stitch double crop in. And last year, our double crop soybeans for like up in that like K County area and stuff like that really just didn't do well, because when we got rain, we got like flooding rains.
Right.
Other than that, we were dry.
Yeah.
And it was hot.
Yeah.
So, they got this area to where it was too dry to plant. Now it's too wet. Now it's too wet. Now it's too wet. Now it's too dry again.
Right.
So it's kind of, we reached that. And it's kind of like what Jason was saying earlier. The later you go into the tighter these windows become of it being too wet to too dry in a very short amount of time. And especially for soybean, that is a dicot that has that growing point above ground, we need to get those cotyledons out of the ground effectively. If we have any sort of surface crusting or sidewall crusting, and Brian Pugh gave a great discussion about this at Winter Crop School, is if we have these situations to where we get the ground dry out and we get a hard layer on soybeans, that could very well limit your root growth, and basically saw that the first restriction we got in soybean is kind of basically where the roots went to. So it's a system that I think physiologically works out better late season, as long as you can get the early season going better. Where on the opposite side of the coin, usually our full season, or our true full season, has a little bit better time establishing, because we are in cooler conditions. We don't get that crusting near as often, but it meets challenges later in the season. So it's once again one of those things, and I think the more no-till you have, the more residue you have available and stuff like that, the better that later planting becomes on the western side. But we've worked with growers on the eastern side, and basically some of them have gone away or minimized some of their double crop, because just the yields they can get on the eastern side from full season are just too high to denote even doing many double crop acres. So it just wasn't worth the drop in yield on a normal year with soybean prices compared to what wheat prices were. This year's a little bit different.
Right.
But, it's one of those situations that depending on where you are in the state, our growers around here often say that double crop is about the same yielding as full season. Those folks over east see that 20% yield drag with double crop, because it is planted later and behind wheat and some of these cross conditions. So
now you were just talking about, the flooding condition, flooding, and then how it just dried out after that. I still remember a couple of years ago, we were down at Perkins, and I guess I've seen it, but I've never really paid attention to it, but a drowned soybean plant, because it just had too much water, and you don't think of that, but the elevation between, I remember you showing me the elevation of this plant and then this plant, and it was just a couple of inches, but still it got too much water that way.
Yeah, and that's what we see a lot of times in these fields that have this topography that we have these low spots and stuff like that, is that you just have those those bad spots in the field for us in our trials, that ends up being very bad. But, soybean, because of the way that it does grow, especially when it's really young, a 24-hour no oxygen period can be very detrimental. On corn and stuff like that, where we have a little bit deeper and we typically see these flooding rains once it's established, and we're more worried about nitrogen and denitrification. That typically takes that 48 to 72 hours to get to the anaerobic conditions where we see denitrification. But if you're talking about a living plant sitting in a pool of water basically for 24 hours, then we'll start to see that cell death there pretty quickly. And it's one of those things that last year and it's not even that. It's you get big washes in the field where you just lose seed and stuff like that. And it's one of those things. The more residue you have, the more infiltration, the better it's going to end up being. And we don't see those issues near as much as.
I never really knew that. You know anaerobic also. I went to camp with her. And it was a camp back in no. Her name was Beth Robic. I'm thinking of someone else. I'm sorry. It's not quite anhydrous, but
it's
I
not
tried.
quite anhydrous.
Terrible. I watched too much Charles Barkley this weekend, so it's okay.
Well, of course, this is being recorded on Monday, so we may or may not know who has won the national championship. When is the national?
We definitely won't, because it's next Monday.
Okay. I've watched 2 games, and both of them have been Sunday, amazing games, by the way. Yeah. So I forget where I was going with that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
I guess your bracket has
Lost
been
pathway. We talked about lost pathways and nitrogen. This is just the podcast Lost Pathway.
It's just gone downhill.
So
we need Jason back.
That says something right there.
He was cracking me up earlier. Anyway. So now Brian, with the prices of everything, you said there will be limited availability for some of the products. What are when you go to the doctor and they give you, this is what you need, and you go to the pharmacist and the pharmacist says, hey, actually, why don't you try this generic? Mm-hmm. Are there, air quotes, generic solutions to the to coming up with the nutrients?
Well, not necessarily. So the nutrients isn't going to necessarily be short necessarily. We're going to have a high price. What I was talking about is more some of the inputs as far as the IPM,
right?
Accessibility, price, registrations being dropped, things like that, and a lot of the stuff is the availability isn't going to be taken care of because it's the availability of the name brand and it's a primary component. Like yellow phosphorus isn't being mined in China or something like that. So it's that there's underlying components of the major products that are just not. And so what the stuff I've been hearing, is like we actually started coming into these problems 2-3 years ago, but we had such a back supply. And we'll also see, and so now we're just running the back supply. We'll also see that there's a lot of products that we just recently saw one that doubled its price.
Right.
Well, that price was actually coming up to the price point that product's been in the EU for the last 4 or 5 years. It's a high demand in the EU. So what historically happened with a lot of products, pesticides, insecticides and such, is that they get sold at a high value to EU and other places, and we're the dumping grounds. Mm-hmm. Whatever's left over comes to the U.S. to a cheap value, and so we get it at a lower value. Whatever's left over.
Right.
And so we've been storing that. Now we're competing with those others. So why sell it to us for cheap when you can go straight to the EU for $120? We're now paying $120 instead of $60.
So I want to go back because I was meaning to ask a question earlier. So you talked about, if we're going into wheat next year, let's say we harvest this and we're going to fallow out and go into wheat next year. Because of the price of phosphorus, and we've been band-aiding a lot of our wheat pH acres with in furrow. Yeah. Is now the time to look for the lime, or
Last year was absolutely. I mean,
for next year.
For next year,
since we can't band-aid it for as cost-effective as we were.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at the band-aid. It took 20 to 30 pounds of phos to compensate for aluminum toxicity at low pH. 25 to 30 pounds per acre. That's on top of the sufficiency needs. Well, that's now $25 or $30.
Yeah.
You're now talking a ton of lime.
Yeah.
Go buy a ton of lime and fix the problem. Plus, okay, now we've got the acidity on the phos impacting that. We also have the acidity impacting atrazine, impacting sulfonylureas, impacting our herbicides. So, if we want to be more efficient, we got to look at that, and the cost of lime will likely go up.
Yeah.
That's more of a diesel issue. That's more of a production cost issue, but it's not going to be the same magnitude as glyphos.
Yeah.
Pound per pound increase, it's not going to be. So,
yeah. So it's one of those situations that we've used as Band-Aids for so many years that now's the time we can get rid of the Band-Aids.
And the latest the Economist ran the numbers that used to say that it was economic to Band-Aid phos for low pH. Ran the same models with last year's phosphorus price. This is last year's, so this is 65 cents. It was no longer economic.
The other question, and from the question I asked you earlier, is based on.
You make it sound like he's not answering it.
No. Earlier today,
you're like a lawyer.
Oh.
I'm going to ask you again the exact same question.
Repeat your name.
Right.
Can we circle back around to? No, but on the value of protein versus just bulk wheat this year. Where do you think that is? Like, do you think protein is going to be as valued as it has been in the past, or do you think just getting grain is going to be?
I'll play the part of Jason Warm. Boom! Answer that.
That's really good. Let's see. All right, so take that. That's my Bill Ron. There's a couple aspects. So let's talk about our marketplace. If we look at the Oklahoma marketplace, what we have, we're going to have low acres. We've lost acres more than likely. They're already starting to zero those out. So you got that issue going in. The acres that are in, I've talked to some of the commercial guys. They feel like we're under fertilized at this point. So if we make a crop, that crop, a good crop, we're probably going to be on the low approach side for anybody that didn't manage it. If it stops raining next week, we're going to have high protein wheat because we don't have much of it.
Right.
And so we're at that. So if we can hold out the crop we have, there's a chance that there's going to be a fair amount of low protein wheat coming in Oklahoma. That would signal value for protein in hard red winter, except for the spring wheat country. We don't know what spring wheat's going to look like. If we have a really big spring wheat crop, these millers and bakers are already looking at maybe a transition to more springs into their platform. When we have a lot of springs, we need low protein hard wheats to balance that out. And so if we have a bad spring wheat season, then that means we're going to need some high pros in the hard red. Unfortunately, this is going to be developing after the fact that a lot of decisions are made. We might be able to make some anthesis in applications on some yellow wheat to build it and to sell to that, but we're looking at some of these bigger market trends that we just don't know. We're going to be short crop, it looks like, worldwide, no matter what. But as far as what the bakers and millers need to reach their end quality, what they need to blend out, if there's a big spring wheat year, we're going to need bulk, lower protein wheat. If that goes short, then they're just going to need protein overall, and they just need protein.
A little mix
Depends.
of both.
Yeah. Depends. I would say that I don't know, you'd have to talk to them. If I would be reaching out to the local millers and bakers right now and say, hey, what are you looking at? What do you need? Can we talk about contracting? And looking at putting some inputs into it.
Because you sent that tweet this weekend that got a lot of good discussion on the value of test weight and the value of protein versus forage yield versus grain yield. And, it's one of those things, the more you hear of long-term wheat reserves being sold off right now, And eventually we're going to potentially we're going to hit this situation where we're just going to be deficient in just wheat. Like just berries. We need more berries.
We just need more wheat, yeah. Western Kansas, Western Oklahoma doesn't look good. China doesn't look good. Australia doesn't look good. South America doesn't look good. So, yeah, we're looking at a short year, assuming Russia and Ukraine will be short too.
Well, and there's that whole thing that, what was it, over 1 million on the negative side from Ukraine on what would be harvested. So they look to be short as well.
I was talking with someone the other day about that, and they were telling me about, Russia and Ukraine, and I said, a lot of the reason prices are where they're, somebody outside ag, I said, a lot of the reasons why prices are where they are because, those two countries ship a lot of wheat to Egypt, and they have in all of the countries that cannot grow grain like that, and so our prices here are reflecting the potential for that. And so with that said, are you seeing input prices or not input prices but decisions on inputs being altered because of that?
Oh, I promise you $10 wheat's altering decisions on inputs right now. Guys that would never run nitrogen this late are calling the co-ops and saying, hey, what can I get? What can I get on? So there's absolute questions. And I've said the same thing. I am making recommendations or at least suggestions that I wouldn't normally make because we're not $3.50, $4 wheat. There's $8, not $10 wheat. So where I would say, typically most of our wheat doesn't benefit from a lot of sulfur in the main body of the state. I would look at my soil test. My soil test this year is shorter than normal.
Right.
And I wouldn't be afraid of 5 to 10 pounds on good ground just to ensure that I've got that there to make good protein and good wheat.
So that's here in north central Oklahoma, but you were saying there's wheat in, say, western Kansas that doesn't look great. What should they be? I mean, are they game over? We're out of the game. Move on to the next county.
That's what I'm hearing.
Right. Okay.
I've seen some pretty disgusting pictures from western Oklahoma, western Kansas. Tales of, this was 2 weeks ago and I needed to check up, but more than a couple producers that are anywhere between 80 to 90% loss.
Really?
So, like I said, I need to check up on those guys and make sure they're still rolling. But
well, there's nothing like ending the podcast on a positive note like that.
Well, I mean, the good thing, Dave, is we have for 2/3 of the state, we've gotten some nice rains, and so we have some wheat that's looking gorgeous out there, and we have some potential on the summer crops. It's just it's one of those situations that just because the commodity price is high doesn't mean we just need to jump off the cliff doing a whole lot of the extra stuff. Do what we need to do to get good commodities in and out of the ground, and then we'll be pretty good.
So, I mean, we've covered a lot in this. Any big takeaways?
Diversification.
Yeah.
Just because of the risk of our soil moisture, know what your inputs are. Have a plan as far if you know what you're going to do as far as crop goes, and you've not talked to your chemical supplier, you called them yesterday.
Yeah.
That needs to be lined out. Your chemical rep person needs to know what you need, and they're going to be booking it for you right now.
Yeah. I mean, because we're right at the door for a lot of things. We're talking about late season fungicide applications in wheat, and we're talking about summer crop planting and stuff like that. So now's the time to make really good friends with your dealer and your suppliers.
Thank you for listening in on the conversation on the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. And if you'd like to join the conversation, send us an email, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com, or send us a tweet. Of course, our handle is reddirtag. To find any of the resources that we talked about today on the podcast, visit reddirtagronomy.com. There you will find show notes, or you can listen to past episodes too. For Dr. Josh Lofton, Dr. Jason Warren, and Dr. Brian Arnell, I am Dave Deacon. I ought to just go ahead and get my PhD so that way I can be cool like those guys. And of course, we want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Ag Now Media LLC 2022. And yes, All rights are reserved.